Welcome to In the Pocket with Rich Gannon. Rich, thank you so much for joining us today.
Erin, always great to be with you.
We appreciate
Not as great after a loss, but we'll take it. We're already moved on to the Browns.
Moving on to the Browns, and like you said, a tough loss for the Raiders, who are now sitting at 3-3, heading into Week 8. We'll talk about that in a moment. But one thing I did notice was how much love Derek Carr and head coach John Gruden gave to the offensive line unit after the game. How did you think, Rich, they did given the circumstance they were under?
It was a crazy week with the COVID situation and what happened and how that could impact not only that meeting room, but those players and their ability to go out and perform. I mean, when you really look at it, Erin, they've had multiple starters all season long at left guard and at right tackle. I thought for the most part they did a nice job. And you and I were just talking prior to the show about, when you start changing parts and pieces up front, it affects everything. It affects communication. It affects the protection. It affects the ability to run the football. When you start getting those combination blocks on the front side and cutting off the back side. And so when you have a different person in there that you haven't had a lot of reps with, you haven't played a lot of game snaps with, it affects the timing and the rhythm, just like it affects the quarterback's timing and rhythm when you start replacing receivers or different tight ends in the game. It's the same thing with that group up front. They need to be a cohesive group that plays together. To me, that's been a problem here the last couple of weeks, especially with the right tackle situation.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, it does impact Josh Jacobs. 17 rushing yards on 10 carries isn't going to get it done. And you know John Gruden's not happy about that. But a bright spot for this offense, wide receiver Nelson Agholor, arguably one of the best free agent signings in the NFL this season. Are you pleasantly surprised from what you've seen from Agholor in the ways in which he is able to contribute and be depended upon in this offense?
He's been one of the better free agent signings, not just for the Raiders, but in the National Football League this year. He already has more receiving touchdowns this season than he did all of last season. I had a conversation with Coach Gruden on Sunday. Last Sunday, he was in the office preparing for the Buccaneers, and that's the one player that he signaled out in terms of the impact that he has made. Just his production, his consistency, his big play ability down the field. I mean, I think he and Derek have just hit it off. And of course, a huge day, 5 for 107 yards and a touchdown. Third straight game with a receiving touchdown. He's been a real bright spot for the Raiders passing attack.
You can definitely tell him and Carr have great chemistry, and I've been calling him Mr. Reliable because heading into Week 7, he had a perfect passer rating when Derek Carr targeted him. So you want to have that when you're banged up on the wide receiver core, which of course they didn't have Bryan Edwards yesterday. But one of the things Coach did mention after the game was the lack of pass rush. And you give Tom Brady time, he's going to take full advantage of you, right? How can the Raiders address this issue, especially given the fact that they are taking on Baker Mayfield next week?
Erin, it's a big problem. You know, the Raiders have allowed 30 or more points in 4 straight games. That hasn't happened since 2012. And part of it is their inability to get consistent pressure on the passer. You know, you take Max Crosby out of the mix, and there's really, not any one particular player that's got more than a single sack. You know, the Raiders are averaging just 1.2 sacks per game. I think it's 29th in the league. And, there's been a lot of effort and money and resources tied up in trying to address the pass rush. And collectively, they have to play better. You know, it's easy to say, we're going to rush the passer. We're going to do it with 5- and 6-man pressures. But that's not what you want to do, particularly against a quarterback like Brady. The best way to attack him is to rush 4 and drop 7 in coverage and be able to get a consistent pass rush with your front. And they've not been able to do that for years. I know it's a concern of Coach Gruden's. I know it's a concern of Paul Gunther, the defensive coordinator. Brady had way too much time yesterday. He wasn't sacked at all in that game. And if you give a great quarterback time in the pocket, something bad's going to happen. And it did. He threw for 4 touchdowns, 369 yards, and he made it look easy.
Yeah.
And, of course, you got to tip your hat to the old man. Set another record yesterday, 559 career touchdowns. That's the all-time record in the National Football League. He's one of the best, but you've got to be able to affect him. You've got to be able to get him off the spot. You got to get him moving right or left, and the Raiders just simply didn't do that enough. in the game yesterday.
Absolutely. You know he's the GOAT at 43 years old, but they were able to disrupt Patrick Mahomes just a game ago. And speaking of quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield, unfortunately, he is also bringing his running back with him, Kareem Hunt. With the Raiders heading to Cleveland next week, Rich, what do you believe their strategy should be for slowing down that scary rushing attack?
They will, and I'm certain of it. They have to go back and look at the previous 6 games that the Browns have played and how defenses have stacked up and played against them. Don't look at the Colts defense. They didn't pressure them. You've got to blitz Mayfield. Look at the numbers. Mayfield under pressure as opposed to when he has time, and his production is really down and affected by the pass rush. And I'm not just talking about a 4-man rush. I think you really have to commit to bringing 5- and 6-man pressures a lot in this game against Baker Mayfield. You also have to stop the run because play action is a big part of what they do, but not having Odell Beckham Jr. should help the secondary. It should also, I think, make Paul Gunther feel a little bit better about playing a bit more man-to-man coverage in this one and also bringing some pressures. You have to blitz Mayfield. You cannot give him time back in the pocket. That's really where he's been most effective through the first 6 games of the season.
Well, the Raiders looking to go 4-3 next week against the Browns, and hopefully they will have their offensive line back up and running at 100%. Rich Gannon, we are always so grateful when we get you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Erin, you're the best. Talk to you next week.
See ya.